Hey everyone, so if you are not going to be in Zoom class today, then you definitely need to watch this video. That way you can understand the experiment that we did. So what we're going to be showing today is an experiment of cutting some paper. There will be two types of cutting happening. The first type of cutting that you'll see is there's a paper and I'm cutting off about 2 inches at a time to add up the amount of pieces of paper that I have. And the second type of cutting I'm going to be doing is I'm going to take a piece of paper and then I'm going to be cutting in half each time. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is make a prediction, and then we're going to go through and I'm going to show you how to fill out the tables and so on. There's going to be a second video for the second part of this that you'll also be able to watch when you get to the second experiment. So this first part here is that prediction that I was talking about. So in this yellow box, you're going to tell me, I think that this type of cutting is going to have the most pieces after 5 cuts. So do you think it's the cutting 2 inches each time, or do you think it's cutting the paper in half each time? So you'll see I have the different tables here. So you can go ahead and pause right now and make that prediction. So what we're going to be comparing is the number of cuts versus number of pieces. We start off with 1 piece, and here you see the 2 pieces of paper. So I'm going to start by cutting off 2 inches each time. And as I'm cutting off 2 inches, you'll see now I have 2 pieces of paper. So after 1 cut, I have 2 pieces left. I'm going to make my second cut, and then I'm going to add up the number of pieces I have. So now I have, after 2 cuts, I have 3 pieces of paper. So we're going to write that in our table. Now time for the third cut. And again, I'm going to add up all my pieces of paper. So I have a total of 4 pieces of paper after 3 of my cuts. Time for the cut number 4. And I'm going to add up those pieces of paper. So after 4 cuts, we got about 5 pieces of paper total. And for the 5th and final cut, I'm going to gather up my pieces. I'm going to add them up. How many think I'm going to have? If you said 6, then you have followed the pattern. So after 5 cuts, I now have 6 pieces of paper. Okay. So these are my pieces that I have in total after cutting 2 inches each time. We're going to fill out this process column in a moment, and now we're going to move on to table 2, where I'm going to be cutting the paper in half. So again, we'll do the process in just a moment. Notice that we're going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to be cutting the paper. I start off with 1 full piece, and now I'm going to be making my first cut in half. I have 2 pieces of paper. So after 1 cut, we now have 2 pieces. Now for cut number 2, I'm halving it again. Now I have 4 pieces. So after 2 cuts, we're going to type in 4 pieces. Now I'm going to half those again. How many pieces do you think I'm going to have? If you said 8, you were right. So now after 3 cuts, I have 8 pieces of paper. You can start maybe to notice a pattern. So I'm going to cut that in half again. And based on that, how many pieces do you think I'm now going to have after 4 cuts? 16. And then for my 5th and final cut, notice that I am halving everything again. I just had to cut it in 2 separate piles, otherwise it was going to make a mess. So now I'm going to add up all of those pieces. And following the pattern after 5 cuts, I'm going to have a total of 32 pieces. So start noticing that pattern that's happening. You can also start to notice a huge difference between table 1 and table 2. So now we're going to start the process column for table 1. The process column is going to help us get the equation, and we're going to start off with, well, no cuts. I had 1 piece of paper. After 1 cut, I had the first original piece of paper. I cut off 2 inches. So mathematically, to get to about 2 pieces, I'm going to add 1. So 1 plus 1 equals 2 pieces. So far, so good. Add my original piece of paper. And for cut number 2, I had the first cut plus another cut. When I add those together, I get 3 pieces. That's the original piece of paper, plus the 2 cuts I already had, plus a third cut, which if I add those up, and I get 4. So if you start to notice this pattern here, I'm just adding plus 1 after every cut. Notice the first one that I have represents that original piece of paper. And then all the ones after that represents the number of cuts. So see, there's the starting piece of paper plus the number of times that I cut is going to equal to my total number of pieces. So that's why I put 1 plus C there, because 1 was the original piece of paper plus the number of cuts is going to give me my number of pieces. There's another way that we can also write this as 1 plus X. X representing the number of cuts, of course. So now we're going to start on the process column for table 2, and we're going to try something similar as we did in table 1. So we start off with our first piece of paper with no cuts. Then 1 cut later, I had 2 pieces, so 1 plus 1 equals 2. And then I have my next cut, so I start off with my original piece of paper, plus 1 because I had 2 cuts, but that does not equal 4. So there's something definitely different. And if you look at your pieces of paper here, notice what's happening each time. What do you think? Doubling. What does doubling mean to do? Well, doubling means to multiply by 2. So 1 times 2, let's try, oh, put that in the wrong spot. So 1 times 2 definitely equals 2. Okay, let's try it again. I had my original piece of paper, I already made a cut, but then I made a second cut, so I got to multiply again. So by multiplying, yep, that equals 4. Let's see if it works this next time. So notice that the 1 is staying there every time because that was the original piece of paper that I had. And if I multiplied those 2's out, that does definitely give me 8. So I think I have found my pattern. And if you notice, the number of 2's that I am writing is the same thing as the number of cuts that I had made that round. So I think I have definitely found my pattern. Now, there's an easier way to write out times 2 every single time because, well, let's face it, if I made 20 cuts, I'm probably not going to want to write times 2 20 times. So that's why it's called the exponential experiment. So we are going to do 1, which was our original piece, times 2 to the C power, or power of C. C, of course, representing the number of cuts. And that little caret is what we call it, where it looks like an arrow pointing up. Okay. That is just a way of writing an exponent right there. Notice that I can use C or I can use X, whichever. There's also another way that we can write it a little bit easier, is 1 times 2. And then if you put your X there, and then what you can do is highlight the X. And when you go to the top where you hit Format, go to Text, and go down to Superscript, it makes that little X at the top. And that's exactly what an exponent looks like. So that's what we're going to be doing this whole unit.